I sold those old beds your kids never use. Harold's smug voice crackled through my phone speaker. My grandkids needed new ones, and those were just collecting dust in your storage. I gripped the edge of my desk at the museum where I worked as a historical artifacts specialist, trying to keep my voice steady. The Victorian rosewood beds with the hand-carved headboards. I asked, already knowing the answer. My children had outgrown them, but we had carefully preserved them in climate-controlled storage for a reason. Yeah, those ancient things, Harold chuckled. Got $2,000 for them. Pretty good deal for some old furniture, right? My daughter's kids deserve nice new beds anyway, not hand-me-downs. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. That's interesting, Harold. And you did this without asking because... Oh, come on, Madison. They were just sitting there, and family helps family. My grandkids needed beds. Besides, you're always going on about history and preservation. It's just furniture. Just furniture, if he only knew. I glanced at the documentation on my desk, papers I'd been preparing for the upcoming museum exhibition on 19th century craftsman Thomas Winchester. The same Winchester whose signature was carefully carved into those beds frames, making them worth roughly $150,000 each to collectors. Well, thank you for letting me know, I said calmly, already pulling up my email to contact the insurance company. Would you happen to have the buyer's information? What for? Harold's voice took on an edge of suspicion. Deal's done. Money spent. My grandkids are happy with their new beds. Just for my records, I replied, since they were in my storage unit. Look, I did you a favor clearing out that junk. You should be thanking me. His tone dripped with the same condescension I'd endured since he married my mother-in-law Jane 2 years ago. Besides, your kids are too old for those tiny beds anyway. I thought about explaining that the tiny beds were actually rare examples of Winchester's early work, commissioned for a governor's children in 1862, that they were featured in multiple historical furniture catalogs, that museums have been trying to acquire them for years, but I kept them safe because they were a legacy from my grandmother, who'd recognized their value when she found them at an estate sale decades ago. But Harold wouldn't understand. To him, anything that didn't immediately benefit his daughter Amanda and her children was worthless. He'd made that clear from the moment he joined our family, constantly comparing our children, making snide remarks about my obsession with historical preservation while praising Amanda's modern sensibilities. You're right, I said instead. The kids have outgrown them. I hope Amanda's children enjoy their new beds. I ended the call before he could respond, then immediately dialed my insurance agent. Sarah, it's Madison Wells. Remember those Winchester beds we have on the special articles policy? I need to report a theft. The authenticated pair from 1862? Sarah's voice rose in alarm. What happened? I explained the situation, my anger finally seeping into my voice. My stepfather-in-law sold them without permission. Claims he got $2,000 for the pair. To thou, Madison, those beds are worth at least $300,000 combined. They're historically significant pieces. I know, I said, pulling up the most recent authentication documents on my computer. That's why I'm calling. I need to file a claim and report this to the police. Harold had no right to sell them, and whoever bought them likely has no idea what they actually purchased. As I spoke with Sarah, my phone buzzed with a text from my husband Peter. Dad just called, sounding weird. Something about beds? What's going on? I typed back quickly. Your stepfather sold the Winchester beds from storage. You know, the ones my grandmother left me. The museum pieces worth $150,000 each. 3 dots appeared immediately then. He died what? Calling insurance now. We'll need to file a police report. Those beds were documented historical artifacts. Peter's response was immediate. I'll call Mom. This is absolutely insane. He had no right. I turned back to my conversation with Sarah, who was already mobilizing the insurance company's art and antiquities team. We'll need to file a police report, she was saying, and contact any local antique dealers who might have purchased them. Thank goodness you had them properly documented and insured. Harold has no idea what he actually sold, I said, a grim satisfaction settling over me. He thinks he did everyone a favor getting rid of some old furniture. Well, he's about to learn a very expensive lesson about selling things that don't belong to him, Sarah replied. The insurance company will want their money back if we can't recover the beds. And since he sold them without authorization, he'll be legally responsible for the full value, I finished. All $300,000 of it. As I hung up with Sarah, another text came through, this time from my mother-in-law Jane. Harold said you're making a big fuss over some old beds. Why can't you just be happy the kids have nice new ones? I stared at the message, thinking about how to respond. Jane, like Harold, had never understood or respected my work in historical preservation. To them, the past was disposable. Only the newest and shiniest things had value. Those old beds were authenticated Winchester pieces from 1862, I wrote back. Worth $150,000 each. Harold sold stolen property, and I've had to report it to the police and insurance company. Maybe ask him why he thought it was okay to sell something that didn't belong to him. The three dots appeared and disappeared several times before her response came through. That's impossible. They were just children's beds. Check your email, I replied, attaching photos of the authentication documents and insurance policies. I'll let you explain to Harold that he just created a $300,000 problem for himself. Setting my phone down, I turned to my computer to draft a formal police report. Harold had always treated me with condescension, dismissed my career, and acted like his daughter's family was more important than ours. Now his arrogance was about to cost him dearly, and I couldn't find it in myself to feel sorry for him at all. My phone buzzed again. A call from the museum's curator. Time to explain why two valuable pieces of American furniture history were now missing, sold for a fraction of their worth by a stepfather-in-law who thought he knew better than everyone else. At least this would be an interesting story for the insurance claim. The aftermath unfolded faster than I expected. Within hours of filing the police report, Detective Morris was interviewing me in my office at the museum. Let me get this straight, he said, reviewing my documentation. Your stepfather-in-law sold two authenticated Thomas Winchester beds, circa 1862, for $2,000, without permission. Correct, I replied, handing him the most recent appraisal. He thought they were just old children's beds in storage. He sold them to buy his grandchildren new furniture. The detective whistled low. And their actual value is $150,000 each minimum. They're featured in several historical furniture catalogs. Museums have been trying to acquire them for years. Just then, my phone erupted with texts. Harold's name flashed across the screen repeatedly, followed by Jane's and Amanda's. I showed the detective my phone. Looks like I've seen the police report. Mrs. Wells, Detective Morris said, I've already contacted local antique dealers with the beds' descriptions. Given their historical significance, we should be able to track them down. Would you like me to speak with your stepfather-in-law? Before I could answer, my office door burst open. Harold stormed in, face red with anger, Jane and Amanda trailing behind him. This is ridiculous, he shouted, waving his phone. The police just called me about those worthless beds. What kind of game are you playing? Detective Morris stood, badge already in hand. Mr. Thompson, I'm Detective Morris. We were just discussing the theft and sale of historically significant artifacts valued at approximately $300,000. Harold's face went from red to white. 300. That's impossible. They were just old beds. Winchester beds, I corrected quietly, from 1862. Authenticated, documented, and insured. Which you would have known if you'd asked before selling them. You never told us they were valuable. Amanda interjected, her voice shrill. How were we supposed to know? That's the point, I replied, keeping my voice level. You weren't supposed to sell them at all. They weren't yours to sell. Jane stepped forward, her expression pleading. Madison, surely we can work this out as a family. Harold was just trying to help his grandchildren. By stealing and selling my property? I asked. Property that was properly documented and insured? That's not helping. That's theft. Detective Morris cleared his throat. Mr. Thompson, I'll need the buyer's information. The sooner we locate these pieces, the better for everyone involved. Harold sank into a chair, his bravado deflating. I sold them to a dealer. Some shop downtown. Second Chances Antiques, I think. The one on Mason Street? Detective Morris asked, already noting it down. Yes, Harold mumbled. I didn't get his card. He paid cash. I exchanged glances with the detective. Cash sales of antiques often meant the dealer knew they were getting something too good to be true. And you didn't think that was suspicious? I asked. A cash payment for 2 antique beds. I thought I was getting a good deal. Harold snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. Mr. Thompson, Detective Morris interjected. You do understand the seriousness of this situation. These aren't just ordinary pieces of furniture. They're documented historical artifacts. Their sale without authorization would result in significant legal consequences. But he's family. Jane protested. Madison, you can't really be pressing charges. I'm not, I said calmly. The insurance company is. Those beds were insured for their full value. If they can't be recovered, they'll want their money back. And since Harold sold them without authorization, he'll have to pay the full value, Detective Morris finished, plus any additional damages. Amanda started crying. Dad was just trying to help my kids. We needed new furniture. And instead of asking or buying it himself, he stole and sold valuable antiques, I replied. Actions have consequences. Harold stood up suddenly. I'll go to the shop. I'll get them back. I'll fix this. Sir, I wouldn't advise that, Detective Morris said firmly. Let us handle the recovery. You've done enough damage. As if on cue, my office phone rang. It was Sarah from the insurance company. Madison, we've got a problem. Those beds, they've already been sold to a private collector. The shop owner claims he has no record of the sale. I put the phone on speaker, watching Harold's face crumple as Sarah continued. We're looking at a full claim situation here. The company will pay out the insured value, but they'll be pursuing full restitution from the responsible party. Harold sank back into his chair, the reality of his situation finally hitting him. $300,000, he whispered, but I only got $2,000 for them. Plus legal fees, Detective Morris added, and possible criminal charges for selling stolen property. Jane grabbed Harold's arm. We'll figure something out. We can take out a loan. Your house isn't worth that much, I said quietly, and no bank will give you a loan for stolen property. Amanda turned on me, tears streaking her makeup. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching our family fall apart. No, I replied, standing up. I'm watching someone face the consequences of their actions. Harold sold something precious, something irreplaceable, without a second thought because he didn't respect its value, or me. The room fell silent except for Amanda's muffled sobs. Detective Morris gathered his notes. I'll be in touch once we track down the collector, he said. In the meantime, Mr. Thompson, don't leave town. We'll have more questions. As they filed out of my office, Harold looked back at me, his arrogance replaced by fear. Madison, please, there must be something. There is, I said. You can start by explaining to your grandchildren why taking things that don't belong to you is wrong. Seems like a lesson this family needs to learn. The door closed behind them, leaving me alone with the weight of what had just happened. My phone buzzed. A text from Peter. Just heard from Mom. Is it true about the beds? Yes, I replied. Your stepfather's about to learn a very expensive lesson about respect. 3 weeks later, I sat across from Harold and Jane in their living room, watching them sign the repayment agreement my lawyer had drafted. The private collector had refused to return the beds, claiming he purchased them legally. The insurance company had paid out the claim and was now pursuing full restitution from Harold. Initial here, my lawyer pointed, and here, this acknowledges your responsibility for the full amount of $300,000 plus legal fees. Harold's hand shook as he signed. He'd aged years in the past few weeks, his arrogance replaced by a haunted look. Jane kept dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. We'll have to sell the house, she whispered. Everything we've saved. You should have thought about that before Harold sold something that didn't belong to him, I replied calmly. Amanda had stopped speaking to me entirely, blaming me for her parents' financial ruin. She'd moved her children's new beds out of spite, claiming they didn't want stolen money furniture. The irony wasn't lost on me. The payment schedule is clear, my lawyer continued. Monthly installments for the next 15 years. Any default will result in immediate legal action. 15 years, Harold muttered. I'll be paying for this until I'm 80. Consider it a long-term lesson in respecting other people's property, I said, standing up. And their professions. Those worthless old beds turned out to be quite valuable after all. As we left their house, Peter squeezed my hand. He'd stood by me through everything, understanding that this wasn't just about the beds. It was about years of disrespect and entitlement. Think they've learned anything? He asked. They've learned actions have consequences, I replied. That's a start. The museum had arranged to display photos of the Winchester beds in their upcoming exhibition, with a note about their unfortunate loss to a private collection. Every time Harold saw the article in the local paper about the exhibition, he'd be reminded of his $300,000 mistake. Jane called the next day, her voice small. Madison, I'm sorry, we should have asked. Should have respected your work, your knowledge. I never thought. That's the problem, I interrupted gently. You never thought. You and Harold just assumed you knew better than everyone else. How's that working out? She was quiet for a moment. We were wrong. So wrong. And now we're losing everything. No, I corrected. You're facing consequences. There's a difference. Maybe next time you'll think before letting Harold make decisions about other people's property. The story spread through the antique collection community. The museum curator even used it as a cautionary tale in his lectures about historical preservation. Always respect provenance, he'd say, or it might cost you your house. 6 months later, I received an unexpected package. Inside was a handwritten apology from Harold, along with detailed photos of the Winchester beds in their new home. The private collector had reached out to him, sending pictures after learning the full story. They're displayed beautifully, Harold wrote. Not that it makes up for what I did. I never understood the value of history, of preservation. I'm learning now, even if the lesson came at a terrible price. I showed the letter to Peter over dinner. Think he means it. Does it matter? Peter asked. He's got 15 years of payments to remind him either way. I smiled, thinking of the empty storage unit where the beds had once stood. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come at the highest cost. Harold had learned that the hard way. The next family gathering was quieter, more subdued. Amanda still wouldn't look at me, but Harold and Jane had lost their superior attitude. Every month when they wrote that restitution check, they were reminded that respect isn't just about money. It's about recognizing value in things you might not understand. As for me, I continued my work at the museum, preserving history one piece at a time. And if I occasionally smiled when signing the receipt for Harold's monthly payment, well, that was just another piece of history in the making.